Thank you for being here. My name is Hammad Khan, and I am the data management librarian here at UTA Libraries. I work in the Research Data Services department. I help with data management plans, and our department can help you work throughout the entire research data lifecycle up to archiving your data sets into the data repository. Today, we have chosen to talk about UTA's data repository, which is named Mavs Dataverse. And this is our institutional data repository. Before we get into the specifics of Mavs Dataverse, I think it's important to remember perhaps why we all are here today. And many of you have research data that was funded by a grant or some type of funding agency that requires that your data be archived and made accessible or be open for further research. So today we will cover the basics of why we share data, fair data principles, our institutional data repository, which is Mavs Dataverse, data resources at UTA libraries, and other data repository options. Data sharing is the practice of making data used for scholarly research available to others. Many funding agencies, institutions, and publication venues have policies regarding data sharing because transparency and openness are considered by many to be a part of the scientific method. So here on the slide, I've listed some points on why we share data. Well, the first thing is you try to preserve your data. Depositing your data in a repository safeguards your investment of time and resources while preserving your research contribution for you and others to use. It meets grant requirements. Many funding agencies now require that researchers deposit data collected as part of a research project. It promotes new discoveries. So sharing your data with other researchers can lead to new and unanticipated discoveries and provide research material for those with little or no funding. It supports open access, so it can be a catalyst for research and discovery. And it shows your support for open access by you sharing your data sets. So since the beginning of modern science, there has been this Latin phrase, nullius in verba, which means take nobody's word for it. It is also the motto of the Royal Society, which is the oldest scientific society in the world, which launched the first scientific journal in 1665. Now, why do I share this? It's because this phrase can be applied to why we share data. While things get published, you should always question the truth or the research results. You can take someone's method and data and replicate it to see if you get similar results. The phrase also is interpreted to mean that things that many hold to be true may actually be false. So go check for yourself. Today in this pandemic, this phrase really holds true. Also, in this pandemic, we have seen why data matters so much and also why research data should follow fair data principles. We don't only want to share our data, but we also want our data to be fair. What we mean by fair data is that the data is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So to be findable, you need to have like some kind of persistent ID. This is like a permanent URL, like a digital object identifier, DOI. To be accessible, that it has open standard protocol, open metadata that people can search for and access. It has to be, the data should be interoperable, meaning that it has data sets that can be analyzed using different software. It should be reusable, clear data licenses. So we want our data to be fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. I mentioned the Royal Society's motto, which is take nobody's word for it. Today's researcher, however, says trust but verify. So on the screen here, we have two articles. One article claims that 6 out of 53 landmark cancer biology studies could be reproduced. The other article states that 39 out of 100 psychology studies could be reproduced. Now, for presentation purposes, I have used these two disciplines as examples, but every discipline is facing the same scrutiny. The research cannot be reproduced because the data is missing from these studies. Now, these studies can be replicated without data, but cannot be reproduced. The National Science Foundation has provided more clearer descriptions between reproducibility and replication of research. And so here you can see how they define reproducibility versus replication. So the ability of a researcher to duplicate the results of a prior study using the same materials and procedures used by the original investigator is reproducibility, meaning if you have the same data, you can reproduce it. If the same procedures are followed, but new data are collected, then that is a replication of the study. And here at the bottom of the slide, you see Stodden's definition of empirical reproducibility, computational reproducibility, and statistical reproducibility. So Stodden states that empirical reproducibility is when data and collection details are made freely available. Computational reproducibility includes code, software, hardware, and details are all provided. Statistical reproducibility includes details on choice of statistics tests, model parameters. So in order to reproduce a study, you need the same materials, meaning the same data the researcher used. Sharing data, code, and workflows facilitates reproducibility. The only problem is that many researchers have not kept up with their own data, and it makes it difficult to reproduce previous research. Data sharing is more than posting your data in your website. So here, this is an article that I'm going to use as an example. How do astronomers share data? Reliability and persistence of datasets linked in AAS publications and a qualitative study of data practices among U.S. astronomers. So in this article, they share with us this graph, and it says more than half of links to data in articles from 15 years ago are broken. External links in all articles published between 1997 and 2008 in the 4 main astronomy journals published by the American Astronomical Society. So this data that they have in these journals is actually missing because the researcher did not deposit it in a data repository, and there was no data curation to follow these, to correct the broken links. And so what you have is 70% of links to personal websites from articles published in 1997 are broken. And if we go further, so this is another article that was published in the Atlantic in 2013. So loss in research data is not limited to a select few disciplines. It is a larger problem for the entire scientific research community. And so how can we improve data sharing? So I'm going to talk about 3 things here. I'm going to talk about new norms, new incentives, and new technology, and how we can improve data sharing. So the new norms. So the new norm is that many research funding agencies, both private and public, now require that data be preserved and made accessible for long-term use. This slide has a list of private and public research funders, but it is not all inclusive. But it gives you an idea that many are now requiring data sharing and open access in order for researchers to get funded for their grants. And here is an article from the New England Journal of Medicine. It's titled Data Authorship as an Incentive to Data Sharing. So this is the new incentives they are giving on why you should share data. It says, here's a quote I pulled. It says, "We believe that both as a matter of fairness and as a matter of providing an incentive for data sharing, the persons who initially gathered the data should receive appropriate and standardized credit that can be used for academic advancement, for grant applications, and in broader situations. Here's more on the incentives. Data sharing actually increases citations. So from 10,555 studies with gene expression microarray data, studies that shared data received 9% more citations. Data reuse by other researchers continued for 6 years after original data was published. And below on the slide, you can find which article I pulled this from. So within the first 6 years of your data being available, it is most likely to be cited. But again, most research papers also include citations that are more recent. Either way, this proves to be an incentive for the researcher to share data as it gets more exposure for their work. Our institute provides a technology solution to data sharing. And so I talked about the new norms, new incentives, and of course there's new technology. And again, UT Arlington provides a technology solution to data sharing. And that solution is through the Dataverse project, which is an open source software to share, cite, and find data. It was developed at Harvard's Institute for Quantitative Social Science. Let me provide a little background here. Texas Digital Library hosts the Texas Data Repository centrally as a single instance Dataverse, an open source platform and community run out of Harvard University's Institute for Quantitative Social Science. The repository is managed collectively and collaboratively by a steering committee made up of library liaisons appointed by each participating institution. So for our institution, I am the representative to the Texas Data Repository Steering Committee. So the Texas Data Repository Steering Committee members and the institutions they represent work together to develop priorities for the repository. 10 academic institutions across Texas currently subscribe to the service, providing a place for their faculty and researchers on campus, a place to deposit and share or publish their data sets. Depending on local policy, researchers can create their own collections or dataverses, deposit their data and supplementary materials and information about their data, and get themselves a digital object identifier, which is a DOI, for the data set so that others can use and cite it reliably. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and show you how you can deposit data into UT Arlington's Mavs Dataverse. So if you go to the website dataverse.tdl, TDL stands for Texas Digital Library, .org. So dataverse.tdl.org/Dataverse, you are brought to the Texas Data Repository homepage. And on this homepage, you will see right here in the middle, Texas Tech University Dataverse. You will see University of Houston Dataverse, and then you'll see UTA Mavs Dataverse. But all of these other dataverses listed here are part of the 10-member institution of the Texas Data Repository. And UT Arlington is also a member. Now, since you have a UT Arlington email address, you will not be able to add data sets to University of Houston Dataverse. But since you have a UT Arlington email address, you will be able to submit and add data to UTA Mavs Dataverse. And so I'm going to go ahead and walk you through on how to do that. So once you're at the Texas Data Repository homepage, just click on UTA Mavs Dataverse, and you are brought to this screen, which is the home page for Mavs Dataverse. And so if you just want to go to the Mavs Dataverse website, just go to dataverse.tdl.org/Dataverse/UTA, and you will be brought to Mavs Dataverse. And here I've highlighted in the middle with a red rectangle, you will see sub-dataverses inside of Mavs dataverses. And so, for example, Black Studies and Digital Humanities and the UTA Libraries Dataverse and Social Networks for Social Good Dataverse. These are sub-dataverses within Mavs Dataverse. So these are, you can say, very niche data sets. So if you feel that you have research data that fits better into the sub-dataverse, you can go ahead and click on the sub-dataverse and add your data set to that sub-dataverse. But most likely, you will just be depositing your data sets into Mavs Dataverse. So you don't have to click on the sub-dataverses. But if you want to add data to the Mavs Dataverse, the first thing you're going to have to do is log in. So the login button is here at the top right corner, the arrows right there. So you just click login. And once you click on login, it's going to ask you to pick your institution. And you're basically going to pick University of Texas at Arlington because you belong to this institution and you have an ID for this institution. So just click on that and then just go to the next page. And then it's going to ask you for your net ID. And since you're at UT Arlington, you have a net ID, just put in your net ID and the password, and you are logged into the Mavs Dataverse, and now you can add data. And how do you know you're logged in? Well, up at the right-hand side, it has your name. So it has my name written right there where it used to say login. And then this add data button has now suddenly appeared once you log in. So once you're logged in, you can actually click on that add data button and add your data sets. So let me show you. Once you click add data, you're going to click on new data set. And so once you click on new data set, you are going to go ahead and describe that data set. So when you describe a data set, essentially you are creating metadata. But since you are filling this form out, this is essentially citation metadata. So you're going to basically give a title to your data set. You're going to go ahead and state who the authors are. And you're going to fill out these metadata fields. So it basically walks you through the metadata steps. And in case if you don't know what metadata is essentially, put it simply, it's data about data. So here you are basically just describing your data set. And so if you continue filling out this form once you're submitting your data set, you're going to have to fill out the country or nation, state or province, geographic coverage, and then just continue following this form. It's pretty straightforward, but in case if you have a question, you can always reach out to me, but there's also these question marks next to the headlines here, and you can find out what they mean by country, nation, or city, and the red asterisk symbolizes that you must fill this portion of the form out. Otherwise, you can't move forward. So then as you continue filling out the form, you get down here to selecting your dataset files. And you can hit select files to add button. The datasets in terms of gigabytes, it cannot be more than 4 gigabytes per file. You can upload, let's say, 10 files, right? And each of them can be up to 4 gigabytes. So let's say you upload 10 files with 4 gigabytes for each file. So you have uploaded 40 gigabytes. But you cannot upload a single file that is more than 4 gigabytes. So each file has a limit up to 4 gigabytes, but you can put in 50 files. But they cannot be more, each individual file cannot be more than 4 gigabytes. And so we take all formats of files of data sets, but most likely we will work with you because we want data sets that can be used for long term. And so the data set that you submit should be interoperable between different data analytical tools. So we can work with you on that. Most researchers submit CSV files or Excel files, and those type of files are really interoperable between a lot of different systems and data analytical tools. So it's very simple to upload a file, but just remember each file cannot be more than 4 gigabytes. So this is where you will add your data set and files. Each file you upload, you can give it a file name and you can give it a description. The other thing is when you upload a data set, we do require that you also submit with it a data dictionary and a README file. And I'll talk about that later in the presentation. But essentially, once you upload a file, you can give it a file name and a description. And then once you're done uploading each file that is in that data set, you can click the Save Dataset button. And once you click Save Dataset, the dataset has been uploaded to the Dataverse. Now, it says right here in green, success, the dataset has been created. You are given a DOI, which is a digital object identifier. It is a permanent link to the dataset, but your dataset has not been published yet. It has just been uploaded. And now, once you have submitted it to the Texas Data Repository, it goes through a review process, and that review process is actually done at the individual institution. So if you submit it to the Mavs Dataverse, we at UT Arlington will go through a review process before it is finally published in the data repository. And so the review process, once submitted for review, the admin or curator for this Dataverse will be notified to review this data set before they decide to either publish the data set or return it to the author. If the data set is published, the contributor will be notified that it is now published. If the data set is returned to the author, the contributor of this data set will be notified that they need to make modifications before it can be submitted for review again. So why is there a review process? Well, sometimes researchers have personal information of participants and have not de-identified them. So we have to review the data set as to not have any confidential information published in the data set. The other thing is we try to make sure the format of the data is interoperable and can be curated as formats expire so they can be updated for future use. We also require people to submit a data dictionary and a README file with the data set so people can understand the contents and variables of the data set. Now, we have a Readme template, and what a Readme file essentially is, it basically tells you the contents of the data set, that this is the author, this is the author's contact information, this is how many files you will find in this data set, this is how many rows and columns. So once you get to the step of depositing your data set and you need help with the data dictionary basically explains what the variables in the data set mean. And so the researcher will create the data dictionary and also the README file. But again, if you need any help with the data dictionary or the README file, you can reach out and I can help you with a template and work with you on creating those files to accompany your data set. So we ask every researcher who deposits in Mavs Dataverse to provide a data dictionary and a README file with their data set. What is UTA Mavs Dataverse appropriate for? It's appropriate for data in any file type, data from any field of research, static or evolving data sets. And what we mean by this is when you deposit a data set into Mavs Dataverse, you can actually upload a new version of that data set. So you can have multiple versions of data continuing. So you can have version 1, version 2, and so you can have evolving data sets. And the Dataverse is also appropriate for individual files up to 4 gigabytes. Again, you will not be able to upload a file that is more than 4 gigabytes. The Texas Data Repository is currently working on increasing the capacity to 10 gigabytes per file. So in the future, you will see this number change, and it's not going to go lower, it's only going to go higher in terms of capacity. And the other thing that Mavs Dataverse is appropriate for is data without confidential or sensitive information. So we do not publish any data sets with confidential or sensitive information in those data sets or anything that can identify a person. And so the main purpose of Mavs Dataverse is to provide a platform for archiving and publishing the data developed or used in support of research at UT Arlington, to promote the reproducibility of that research and to facilitate sharing and collaboration. And the benefits of depositing data sets into Mavs Dataverse is that we have version control, which helps track progress and keeps collaborators up to date. Published data sets are assigned a DOI, which is a digital object identifier, to allow for citation of that data set. It's also a permanent link to the data set. It allows for flexible access controls, lets users decide when, with whom, and how much data to share, customizable metadata fields and permissions, and it allows for long-term preservation of uploaded data. I'm going to go ahead and talk about what is metadata. A lot of people have questions about this and have concerns and feel like they don't completely understand it, but metadata is a really simple concept. It's essentially data about data. It is searchable, descriptive information about your research data. And metadata can include many types of information. You can have author, creator, contributor, publisher. But one of the benefits of submitting data sets to Mavs Dataverse is that it walks you through some metadata fields. But you can always reach out to me and ask for help when you are ready to submit your data set, and we can help you through this. It is important to correctly describe the data, as when people search for it, you're able to have the data set appear in the search results. So metadata is really important if you want people to be able to find your data set. The other benefit of Mavs Dataverse is that it follows fair data principles. So data in Mavs Dataverse is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And so here you can see that it provides you with a data citation with persistent identifier. So a DOI is given for each data set. The data files are located right there. And again, this is an open data repository. So people can search and find your data sets and use them and cite them. And again, we do have metadata, which helps with people actually searching for certain keywords or authors, and they're able to locate your data sets. We also have data licenses and user agreements. And you can also have, again, data set versions. So if you need to upload a new data set version, you can include new versions to that data set. And so now that I've talked to you a little bit about Mavs Dataverse, I'm just going to briefly discuss some of the services we provide at UT Libraries related to data. So at UTA Libraries, we have a department called Research Data Services, RDS. And what we help with is data management planning and with preparing data for deposit. We offer advice on appropriate file formats, metadata, and licensing options. We provide training materials or workshops for users to upload and manage their own data collections. And here I'm going to provide you some information on the Data Cave, which is located in UTA Libraries. Currently, the Data Cave is closed due to COVID, but we do plan on opening for the fall semester. And these hours listed on the screen are not correct. Please visit the UTA Libraries website for correct hours before you come to visit the Data Cave. You may also want to just email datacave@uta.edu to find out about our hours, or visit the libguides.uta.edu/datacave for more resources. Again, you can email the Data Cave at uta.edu email for any data related question. The Data Cave is the center for data creation, analysis, visualization, and exploration. Here in the Data Cave, we try to walk you throughout the entire research data lifecycle and help you through that process of planning, creating, finding data sets, analyzing them, visualizing them, and then finally depositing them into a data repository for long-term preservation. The Data Cave is located in the basement of UTA libraries, and it provides support and services throughout the research data lifecycle. We have high-powered computers in this lab where you have access to multiple data analysis software. So please feel free to visit. We also have data-related workshops during the fall and spring semesters and have people working in the Data Cave that can help you with your data. The other resource on campus is the Research Data Portal. You can go to dataportal.uta.edu, and here on this website, you can see on the right-hand side, it says planning, acquiring, storing, describing, analyzing, sharing, and preserving. And if you click on this, there's a drop-down menu, and you can actually find the people across campus that can help you with your data throughout the research data lifecycle. So this research data portal is also an excellent resource for researchers on campus to get help with their data sets. Now that I've kind of talked about the resources here at UTA Libraries, and I've also talked about our institutional data repository, which is the Mavs Dataverse. Mavs Dataverse is just one option. Of course, it's our institutional data repository, and we highly encourage you to deposit your research data in Mavs Dataverse, but you also have other options, and you can find a data repository for your data set using these tools. So there's the Registry of Research Data Repository, there's the Directory of Open Access Repositories, there's the Fair Sharing, the Nature Scientific Data Recommended Repositories. So you have many options for data repositories, but what should you really look for when you're looking for a repository? Let me talk about that. So data repositories, you should really look for data repositories that maximize discovery and access. You should also ask this question: does your selected repository provide DOIs, which is digital object identifiers? These are basically permanent links that link to your data sets. It also makes it more likely for your data sets to get cited. Also, does your selected repository provide help for metadata creation? And so all three of these things, Mavs Dataverse does successfully. It helps maximize discovery and access. It helps you get a DOI. It also helps with metadata creation. So whenever you look for a data repository, ask yourself these three questions. Also, other things you should consider when you're looking for a data repository is access, permanent identifiers, embargoes, licensing. Is it open data commons? Is it Creative Commons? Depositing data, is it self-deposit or mediated deposit? Does it offer curation? Does it offer data disposal? And of course, some data repositories are accredited and have certification. And again, accreditation and certification just adds to legitimacy. For example, Core Trust Seal is a certification, and the Texas Data Repository has currently applied for that certification. So look for these things when you are considering a data repository. With this, I am going to go ahead and conclude my presentation. And what I'm going to ask is, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. You can ask them here, or if you find it better to email me, this is my email address. If you ever have any questions related to the Mavs Dataverse or depositing your data sets into a repository, please do not hesitate to contact me. This is my email address. It's hammad.khan@uta.edu. And if you could kindly fill out this feedback survey, if you just go to davis.questionpro.com, it's a short survey about this presentation. If you could fill that out as well, that will be great. And if you don't have any questions, I just want to say thank you so much for attending this presentation. I really hope it was helpful.